Welcome to the podcast about investing in startups, where existing investors can learn how to get the best deal possible, and those that have never before invested in startups can learn the keys to success from the venture experts. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome to another special release of Investor Stories. On this installment, the experts discuss a startup that they did not invest in, why they passed, and if there was a key learning that now informs their approach. Here's the segment called Why I Passed. On today's special segment, we have Sarah Anderson of Centrifuge. Sarah, can you tell us about the Anti-Portfolio, a fund that you passed on?
Yeah, so probably one of the more interesting passes that we had was with 500 startups. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Yeah.
So we had spoken with them when they were just forming their first fund, and obviously we passed then because it was a very interesting and unique model. But in my mind, having that many investments in one portfolio would just give you a regression to the mean, right? It would essentially put you at kind of the average of whatever that vintage year was returning. So we waited, and then we dug back in. I think it was around Fund 3, because we started looking at the numbers, right? And surprisingly enough, and granted, it was still all on paper because it had only been, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years. They've done some pretty speedy raises. Their performance was fantastic, and so we really started looking at what their internal process was, and they had knocked out very thoughtful about how they were building this portfolio to create outsized returns. And it wasn't necessarily about the numbers, it was about the follow-on process and what checks they were writing to whom and where their money was actually coming from, which we found to be incredibly fascinating. And we really started to like what they were doing. The reason we passed was, it took us too long to figure out. It's a system, right? 500 startups is, I would equate it to a system of funds, basically. Mm-hmm. And trying to figure out the operations of it and the internal machinations just took us too long. It was complicated, and so we ended up declining. But it was very interesting. I mean, I definitely had one thought in my mind. And it was wrong. So that's a fund that I think is a very interesting one. We'll continue to watch it. Wow. Although with recent breaking news about one of their founders, yeah. I don't know what's going to come about their portfolio development, but we'll see.
On today's special segment, we have Ash Fontana of Zeta Venture Partners. Ash, can you tell us a story about a startup you passed on, why you passed on the startup, and how the situation played out?
Yeah, I'm always a little bit careful of mentioning individual companies, but yeah. What I will say is a sort of a general point, right? Which is that we very, very often pass on companies that have amazing traction, companies that we find all over the world that have built this product, a SaaS product usually, that's got incredible traction, and the price is right and the team's great and we want to work with them. But, they just don't have a data strategy. They don't have a way to develop a competitive advantage through data, and we pass on them. And some of those companies have gone on to do incredibly well. And our thesis is that, well, they'll do really well for a while, but not for 5-10 years. And so we've passed on a lot of companies in that category that have gone on to do really well, which we should ostensibly regret. But we'll see if our theory plays out or not. So I've got a bit of a categorical answer to this question, but we'll ask the same question in 2 years and I might have some very particular points of regret.
On today's special segment, we have Chris Duovos of VIA. Chris, can you tell us a little bit about the anti-portfolio? Whether good or bad, can you tell us a story about a fund that you passed on?
Sure. It's funny because I passed on a particular fund twice. So I was at Princeton in 2004 when Excel came back, and I think it was XL9. I think that was the Roman numeral. And, to not bury the lead, that's the Facebook fund. And so, but, you looked at Excel in those days, and it was actually not obvious that they were an exciting fund. So it's funny because in later years, I talked to, a GP who's been, top 10 Midas list kind of guy who's been in the business for 30 years. And I said, I turned down Excel at Princeton. They came to us in 2004. We said no. And then I left and went to TIFF, and they were in the portfolio at TIFF. And I got there and I'm like, no, these guys are not investable. And I go, what? I turned down one of the best funds of that decade, probably the best fund of that decade.
Wow.
Although I think FRC2 will be better. But the best fund, certainly the first half of that decade, twice. What did I miss? And this kind of senior statesman said to me, he goes, look, you did everything a well-trained investor should have done. If you looked at it at that time, like I had LPs calling me, LPs who weren't in Excel, calling me saying, oh my God, we had an oh shit moment because we've been like knocking at that door for years and years. And finally there's a chance for us to get in, and we got the, data room access, and their funds have sucked. And at that point they did. Now they went on a nice run, and obviously Facebook, capped it, but even ex-Facebook, they kind of righted that ship. But, you look back and like a lot of LPs were having this oh shit moment. A lot of really smart LPs turned away. People don't remember Peter Fenton had just left. Jim Getz had just left, right? There was it was a team in turmoil, and you're like, this is a really easy no. And then boom, they go and crush it. Right. Wow. And I turned that down twice. And I think a lot about this, like, this goes back to my thought about, Warren Buffett, there are no called strikes in investing. Well, I was facing Nolan Ryan, and he like tossed me an underhand softball, right? Like if you think about it in a sense, but the instinct, you fall back on your training and your heuristics, and they failed me there, right? And what was it? Or maybe I was just unlucky, right? Like, and I struggle with that to this day. Like, what are the learnings from that? Like, it's the epistemology of investing. Like, what is our justified true belief? Why do we believe in certain things? And so, I lose sleep, even though I don't know if I should, because I don't know if I would have made that. I don't know what I could have known at that time that would have made me make a different decision, but it was a bad one.
It's tough. So if you saw it again right now, it's still a tough one. It's still a pass.
Well, Excel today.
Well, if you saw the same ingredients, right? Because that's what you're going off of. You don't have the performance.
Right. If you showed me a fund with mediocre performance, a premium carry, and team turmoil, I think it's a pretty easy no. And they went and they crushed it, right? And the answer is like people who stayed in, they said we stayed in because of brand, right? And I tend to be skeptical of brand. I don't think it's as, especially in this noisy world today, I don't think it's as durable as people think it is. I think there are really like 5 brands, if not fewer. But then on the flip side, I always think it's like Congress, right? Everybody hates Congress but loves their congressman. Like there are people, if you went and asked 50 LPs who the top 10 firms were, you'd probably get like a list that was like 150 firms long.
Right. Interesting. That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.